friends, real quick. We're on a mission to hit 25,000 subscribers by Halloween, and every single sub, like, and comment helps push The Darkest Hour out to a wider audience. And remember, we never have ads in between our stories. So if you enjoy spooky stories and want to help this haunted little corner of YouTube grow, hit that subscribe button because it truly makes a difference. Thank you. Now, on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. There's something about bars that makes them natural vessels for all kinds of spirits. Maybe it's the dim lights, old wood soaked with decades of laughter and heartbreak. There are places where secrets are whispered and sometimes never leave. Could be the history, fights that turned bloody, lives cut short, or simply the steady weight of those people who came and went, leaving some trace of themselves behind. Tonight we'll step into those spaces. Hotel lounges, forgotten speakeasies, dive bars sticky with time. Listen closely, and you may just hear the voices that left this world long ago. So, let's get started. Shall we? I worked at a rowdy little dive bar in my early 20s. The floor was always sticky. The neon sign was always half lit. The regulars knew every bartender by name. It wasn't glamorous by any means, but it was always packed, always loud. I learned more about people in those few years than I probably have in the rest of my life combined. One night, though, the bar became something else entirely. It was a weekend, busy as hell, when a couple burst through the doors. At first we thought that they were just another drunk pair, looking for a late-night drink. But the energy was wrong. They were frantic, looking over their shoulders. Within seconds, it was obvious they weren't just hiding from an argument. They were hiding from the law. Turns out they were on the run. Law enforcement was close behind, and they tried to disappear into the crowd, pushing through people as if they could blend in. It didn't work. The place erupted into chaos as officers poured in. And before long, the entire scene spiraled into a standoff. It ended violently. A heavy shootout right there at the bar, and both of them were killed. For weeks afterwards, the place felt different. The regular crowd came back, the music cranked up, security increased. But when the lights dimmed and the noise died down, there was this strange heaviness, like the bar itself had remembered what happened and was grieving every night. It started small. A few of us closing up at night would hear things, faint voices, like someone calling a name. The strangeness, of course, being that no one else was around. Sometimes it was clearer, or like a muffled conversation carrying from an empty corner. At first, we brushed it off, figured that sound just bouncing off of old walls. But over time, it happened too often to dismiss, and investigations would lead to nothing. The jukebox was something that really got us, though. This was back before everything went digital, so it was the old school kind. Rows of CDs, plastic tile cards that you had to scroll through with a keypad. Quarters feeding the whole machine. During a busy night, that thing ran constantly, blasting the same handful of songs over and over again until you thought your brain would melt. But after hours, when the last drunk stumbled out and we were sweeping up, the jukebox would come alive on its own. At first, it was random songs blaring without anyone touching it. which was bad enough. But what unsettled us most was catching the machine in the act. Every now and then you'd glance over. You'd see the little plastic tile cards flipping back and forth, as though someone invisible was carefully browsing before making a selection. No coins, no hands near the buttons, no one close enough to explain it. Just a jukebox choosing for itself. And it wasn't just one or two of us seeing it. Everyone who worked there had their own moment. The first time it happened to me, I nearly dropped a tray of glasses. I stood frozen, watching it flip through albums, land on a track, and then, without hesitation, the music started. The rest of the activity was typical haunting fare, but no less unnerving. Lights that would flicker so often we stopped bothering fixing them. Bulbs that burnt out after only a few days. Pool cues tipped over from the racks when no one was near them. I even heard, more than once, someone say my name, clear as day. When I was alone at the bar, a couple of times, I thought that it was one of my coworkers calling me from across the room, only to remember I was the only one there. And on the rare occasion where more than one of us had heard it, a name specifically, we'd exchange uneasy glances, but never talk about it for long. No one wanted to admit to how much it rattled them, and no one wanted to respond to it. Over time, we did start joking about it. Our phantom desperados, as one of the bartenders liked to call them. It made sense in a way. Two people had met a violent, desperate end inside those walls. Maybe a piece of that chaos, that panic, stayed behind. Maybe they were still trying to run or hide or just make their presence known. And I think about the officer that lost his life. I'm sure that's not how he wanted to go. Whatever the explanation, the bar was never just a bar again. After last call, when the music stopped and the crowd was gone, the building belonged to someone or something else. I was working at a small wine bar on the Jersey Shore, back when I had first started in the service industry. I had been at this location for a while, but on this day, most of the staff was across the street helping out at the sister spot. That left me alone in the bar, trying to look productive while I prepped glassware and cut garnishes. The setup was simple. A narrow bar up front, a cozy dining area with tables scattered near the windows, and a cellar downstairs where we kept a bulk of the wine. The kitchen had a little monitor pointed at the front entrance so whoever was back there could see when someone came in, and a soft ding-dong chime that sounded every time the door opened. I was putting something away when the chime went off. Out of habit, I glanced up at the monitor. A large man with a beard had just walked in. He wasn't subtle either. He looked like he was in a good mood, moving his arms like he was grooving to a song that only he could hear. It made me smile a little bit. He seemed like the type of guy who might sit at the bar, order a glass of red, and tell you his whole life story. I called out, "Be right with you." Finished what I was doing real quick. The distance from this area to the bar's swinging doors was maybe 10 feet, so I walked through in just a couple of seconds. But the dining room was empty. I frowned, figuring maybe he'd gone to look around. The bar wasn't that big, though. You could see the whole space in a glance. Nobody. I even crouched down, checking under tables like maybe he'd dropped something. Still, nothing. A little unsettled, I figured he'd gone into the wine cellar. Guests are allowed down there to pick out bottles if they wanted. I hurried down the short staircase, the air cooling as I descended. The racks stretched out neatly, hundreds of bottles tucked in rows, but it was silent. No steps or movement, and no sign of any person. That's when my nerves sort of kicked in. I jogged back upstairs and went out the front door, The street outside was empty, not a soul in sight. By the time the rest of the staff returned from across the street, I was still kind of rattled. I told them what I'd seen. The man had come in, clear as day, waving his arms like he was dancing, and then completely vanished. They didn't look surprised at all. One of the girls said, "Oh, you saw him too." Turns out the building had a reputation. Years back, a man had lived in an apartment above the bar. He died suddenly, heart attack or the like. They said that ever since, people swore they caught glimpses of him inside, always cheerful and animated, always lingering near the front entrance. I worked there for a while after that, but I never saw him again, and nobody else disappeared on me like that. I used to work at a speakeasy. Obviously, I can't tell you where it is, secrets and all that, but I'll tell you this much. It's still around, still open, still pouring drinks, and I've never worked anywhere quite like it. I don't mean one of those fake Instagram-y looking speakeasies where you push through a phone booth to get to some neon-coated cocktail lounge. I mean, this place was actually a speakeasy during Prohibition. The front has changed over the decades. Restaurants, stores, even an office space at one point. But the basement never left. That basement was where I worked. Brick walls, low ceilings, lighting that makes everyone look a little better after 2 drinks. We leaned into the old school vibe. Strong cocktails, candlelight, and music that feels like it belongs in the room. People loved it. But here's the thing about working in a space like that. You start to feel the history, and sometimes the history literally feels you back. Of course, I'll explain. During Prohibition, the basement had been the kind of spot that people only whispered about. You couldn't and wouldn't just stumble in. You had to know someone. The door was hidden, and once you were inside, you had live jazz, poker tables, bathtub gin, the whole 9 yards. But the good times didn't last in this little spot. In the late 1920s, the place got raided. The story goes that the feds kicked down the door. People panicked, bottles smashed, tables overturned. And somewhere in the chaos, a man was shot. No one agrees on whether it was a gangster, a customer, or just some poor guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. All they say is that he was wearing a dark suit and never made it out of that basement. My first night, when I first started there, the other bartenders gave me the usual new hire warnings. Not about showing up late or skimming tips, about the ghosts. They told me, if you're closing alone, don't hang out too long after the last customer leaves. And if you hear music when the bar's dead silent, just let it play. I remember sort of laughing. I thought I was just part of the shtick. Every old bar has its ghost story, right? But my first real closing shift, weeks later, I found out they weren't joking. I was wiping down the counters, counting the till. I started to notice something. Faint music. Not from the speakers, they'd been off for a half an hour. And not from upstairs. The place above us was closed too. It was jazz. Old, scratchy. Like it was bleeding through from another time entirely. A trumpet, low and lazy, with piano underneath. It was so soft at first I thought that maybe I was imagining it. But then it just swelled. Enough to make me stop what I was doing and listen. And then just like that it cut off. Dead silence. I told myself old building, weird things. But that explanation felt thinner than the walls I was working under. A few weeks later, I was restocking bottles near the hallway that led to the bathroom. I looked up and was stunned. There was a man standing in the hallway, tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark suit. The longer I looked, I realized he wasn't solid. Not see-through exactly, but like the edges of him were blurred. He didn't move towards me, he just paced slowly, from one end of the hallway to the other. I called out, thinking maybe it was a customer who'd wandered back, but as soon as the words left my mouth, he was gone. He didn't walk away, he just disappeared. As I was leaving that night, I mentioned it to one of the servers, trying to sound casual. She gave me this look and said, "Oh, so you've met him." Like she was waiting for me to bring it up. Apparently everyone who works there sees him eventually. Always in the hallway, always pacing. So the stories they told me on the first day weren't bullshit, because I saw it for myself. It wasn't just him either. Glasses would slide down the bar when no one was near them. He'd set a bottle on a shelf, turn to grab another, and the first one would clatter to the floor. Customers sometimes mentioned seeing an extra man in the mirror, the one behind the bar, even when there was no one standing where they swore he'd been. That music, it always happened. Always late, always after stragglers were gone. Sometimes just a trumpet, others a full band. Always jazz, always from nowhere. One night, the entire staff had heard it. We were having a team meeting, sitting around, some counting tips, others talking, when the faint sound of a sax drifted through the room. We all stopped talking at the same time. We listened as it built for maybe 30 seconds, then cut off in the middle of a note. None of us said a word. We just got back to our work, continued our conversations. I didn't quit because of the hauntings. Honestly, part of me loved it. The idea that I was working in the same place that people had been laughing, drinking, hiding from the law a century ago. It gave the job weight. Like we were just the next act in a show that never really ended. But I'll never forget that man in the suit. I only saw him once, but I can still picture the way he walked. Slow and deliberate. From a different time, honestly. And like he'd been pacing that same hallway for 100 years. So is he the gangster? Just a poor guy, wrong place, wrong time. Maybe both, maybe neither. All I know is I never really got to see him again. I guess he just wanted to introduce himself. A few years back, I visited Seattle for a long weekend with a couple of friends. We were bouncing between bars downtown. It was a blur of a night, few drinks here, few drinks there. But there was one place impossible to forget. Not because the drinks or the music, but because of what happened when I stepped into the bathroom. The bar itself didn't look like much from the outside. Faded neon signs above the door, black painted windows, a faint throb of bass bleeding into the street. Inside it was wall-to-wall noise, people shouting over one another, pitchers of beer slamming onto tabletops. The music was 90s grunge. The place looked like it had been stuck since the city's heyday. It felt exactly like the kind of dive you'd expect to find tucked between tattoo shops and pawn stores. After a couple of rounds, I excused myself to find the restroom. It was tucked away down a narrow hallway. There was an exit sign overhead. The door never closed all the way, so the sound of muffled music carried in behind me. There were 2 stalls and a urinal. The far stall was closed. I didn't think much of it. Someone was probably in there. So I ducked into the other one. The walls were covered in graffiti, layers and layers of it. Random names, crude jokes, strange little sayings scattered into the paint. It felt like being surrounded by the voices of everyone who'd ever been in there. I wasn't quite done with my business when the rattling started. At first it was subtle, just the clink of the latch being tested. Then it came again, and again, harder each time. My stall door was shaking. I looked underneath. There was no one next to me, no one in that stall. I looked in front of me, no one on the other side of the stall. So who was shaking the door? Bathrooms like this are always weird, people stumbling in, but there was nobody there. This wasn't somebody fumbling with the lock. This was something fumbling with the lock, but they had no feet. I could see nothing under the stall. The shaking got worse, loud enough that I felt the vibration through the thin wall. The latch clattered like it was about to snap clean off. My pulse was for some reason just in my throat. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but my legs wouldn't even let me get up. Then it just stopped. Silence. The door that had just been rattling like a madman was now perfectly still, locked tight. I sat there in the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, waiting for something else to happen. It didn't. I forced myself up and unlocked the stall. I walked out without even washing my hands. As I pushed back into the bar, the noise of the crowd hit me like a wave. Nobody noticed that I looked pale, that my hands were shaking. My friends were still at the table, laughing like nothing was wrong. For a second, I wondered if I'd imagined all of that. If maybe it was just the building settling or some weird draft. But deep down, I knew better. I only went into that bar once, but even now, I just get a little bit anxious in a public restroom when I have to latch the door shut. I spent some time in my early 20s working at a dive bar. When I say dive, I don't mean the kind that advertises itself as such while still charging $12 for a cocktail with lavender syrup. I mean the real thing. Floors sticky no matter how many times you mop them. Beer signs buzzing in every corner. And the bathrooms that you'd only use if you'd already had 3 shots and a prayer. The bar had been around forever. Before my time, before my boss's time even, probably before some of the regulars were even born. I mean, you could tell these walls had soaked up 50 years of spilled beer, cigarette smoke, bad decisions, and stories better left untold. And in the middle of all that, we had Jimmy. Jimmy was a regular back in the day, long before I started, but he also worked there. The old-timers all had stories about him. How he'd walk in at 4 p.m. sharp, claim the third stool from the left, order a cheap lager and a whiskey back, and hold court until closing on his days off. He wasn't loud about it, just steady, reliable. The kind of guy who gave a bar like ours its backbone. The thing about Jimmy, though, was his TV. See, in the back room, the cluttered little break space where we kept extra cases of beer, boxes of chips, and random junk too dusty to throw away. There was this old 13-inch TV perched on a shelf. It barely worked by the time I got there. The screen was scratched, the antenna was bent, the dials really stiff. But back when Jimmy was alive, that TV was his ritual. Every night he'd shuffle back there on break or when the bar got too loud, crack another beer and tune into whatever game or late-night rerun he could find. Baseball, boxing, old sitcoms didn't really matter. If it was noise, he was happy. When Jimmy died, heart attack, sometime in the early 2000s, the bar lost one of its fixtures. But if you asked anyone who worked there, Jimmy never really left. The first time I heard about him, it was on my very first night behind the bar. One of the regulars leaned over and asked, "You met Jimmy yet?" I thought he meant another bartender. "No," I said. "You will," he told me. And then he grinned like it was the punchline to a joke. I didn't get it until closing. We'd cut the lights, locked the door. I was restocking napkins when a faint glow spilled through the cracked door of the back room. I thought maybe someone had left a flashlight on, but when I opened the door, there was the old TV, lit up, flickering. the antenna angled toward nothing, static hissing loud enough to fill the room. I just stared at it. Nobody had touched that TV all night. It wasn't plugged in, but maybe it used batteries. I'd learn later it didn't. Then the static shifted, rolling like a wave, and through the snow came a voice. Just 2 words clear as day. "Hey, friend." The cook, who'd been counting tips nearby, poked his head in. He didn't look surprised at all. "Jimmy's just saying goodnight," he muttered, went back to his work. The TV had become Jimmy's calling card. Sometimes it was at midnight, sometimes after last call, sometimes in the middle of the afternoon lull when only 1 or 2 customers were hanging around. You'd be wiping down the counter and suddenly notice the faint glow bleeding from the back room. Open the door, and there it was, the TV scanning channels on its own, voices stuttering in and out, like it was trying to piece something together. Every now and then, especially if you really listened, it did. Little fragments, half sentences caught between static. "Hey, friend. Be safe. Pour one for me." Always short, always simple, but it was enough to stop you in your tracks. The regulars shrugged it off like it was nothing. "That's Jimmy," they'd say. Always watching the game, always making sure you're not alone. Even though everyone seemed to feel nothing but comfort, I tried to debunk it, of course. Checked the cord, unplugged, tested the outlet, dead. I even tried plugging the thing in once just to see. Nothing. It wouldn't power on at all. But somehow, when it wanted to, that little screen came alive. It wasn't just me who saw it. Customers had their moments. One night, a guy waiting for the bathroom opened the wrong door, found the TV blazing in the dark. He swore the voices strung together, whole sentence. "Don't drive tonight." He laughed it off until his ride showed up. Friend of his, 3 sheets to the wind. He ended up calling a cab instead. Later he told me that message probably saved his life. Another time a group of college kids dared each other to peek into the back room. The TV flared up right on cue, showing what looked like an old fight. 2 boxers trading blows in grainy black and white. One of the kids swore the fighter looked exactly like Jimmy. It wasn't, of course, but these are the kinds of things that would happen. My favorite was the night that I stayed late, alone, after everyone else had gone home. I was finishing inventory, dragging myself through the motions when I heard something soft, faint, steady. A baseball announcer's voice. I opened the back door, and there it was, the TV tuned into a game that had aired decades ago. Grainy players in old uniforms. The crowd roaring like ghosts and static. I stood there watching until the picture cut out. Just before it went dark, the channel shifted and a voice came through. It was familiar and warm, like someone I knew, leaning in close at the bar. "See you tomorrow." I don't really scare easily, but I'll admit, I had goosebumps with that one. Here's the thing, Jimmy wasn't frightening. He didn't throw bottles or slam doors or make things harder on us. He didn't mean harm. He just wanted the bar alive the way that it was when he was there. Loud, messy, full of voices and games, the hum of that old TV in the back room. Maybe that's why he stuck around. Dive bars are temples of routine. Same faces, same drinks, same rituals. For Jimmy, leaving would have meant breaking the cycle, and he wasn't ready to do that. I'm pretty sure, like so many others in the area, the bar eventually shut down. The building's still there, boarded up, waiting for someone to take a chance on it again, but they probably won't. I like to think if they ever plug anything in that back room, again, like a TV, a radio, Jimmy would be right there, tuning in, making sure nobody closes the place in silence. If you ever find yourself in some forgotten dive and the glow of an old TV flickers in the dark, I recommend don't be afraid. Pull up a stool, pour a beer, and listen. Because chances are there's a Jimmy still saying goodnight just about everywhere. This is my first time to ever admit this, and I haven't talked to anyone about this because I don't need any judgment about the relationship I have with my dad. I'd say about 2 years ago was when I officially cut contact with him and the rest of that side of the family. I'm in my 30s, and I have a family of my own now. Dealing with his belligerence was no longer worth whatever benefits I thought keeping him in my life would provide. 5 years ago, my mom passed away, and he latched onto the tragedy as an excuse to continue drinking instead of mourning properly. And it wasn't her death that got him drinking. He'd always been a drinker. He even owned a bar in his heyday, and that's where he met Joyce. Then he sold it a few years later, moved us all to Montana. He used to be a functioning drunk, but her death allowed him to go full force into the bottle, as it was the only love that wouldn't leave him. I tried to get him into rehab several times. He'd always been a closeted drunk, lying about his addiction any chance drinking came up. He's a lost cause, and I'm going to leave it at that. The last conversation I had with him was on the phone while I was on a break at work. He called me completely shit-faced. When I asked, "Dad, it's 9:30 in the morning. Are you drunk right now?" He got pissed, denied it like he always did, even though he couldn't form a full sentence to tell me otherwise. The last words I said to him were, "Call me when you're sober." And don't worry, I've already done therapy to get over this health problem. She's the one that said I either need to accept my dad for who he is or accept that I won't have contact with him. I saw him do that with his mom, my grandma. She used to live in our basement for years, just drinking and waiting for death to come knocking. I watched my dad go into debt trying to take care of her. I watched him have to choose between medications and the mortgage so many times it was a balancing act that my grandma would outlive past the foreclosure. I refused to let that be my adult life, and I resented my dad for being so willing to let that be his. I could go on, but I'd be beating a dead horse at this point, and you either get it or you don't. Either way, that's not the reason for this. After I cut ties with him, I've been hearing my mom's voice. It's not every day, but it's multiple times a week. I hear something that sounds identical to her tone and cadence. It happens randomly. Been happening for 2 years. Like she's just out of view in the other room. I hear her say my name sometimes, and sometimes it's, "Call Dad." Her name was Joyce. She was my stepmom, not even my real mom. But that's how you know my real mom was into some bad shit if my dad got custody of me. Joyce met my dad when I was 12. As much as she wanted to fill the mother role for me, it was a business I didn't really invest in with her. She was also an enabler. I thought having her around would get my dad to improve himself, but they met through friends at a sports bar. She was already accustomed to that lifestyle, with a few ex-husbands under her belt as well. Could Joyce have gotten a better catch than my father? Yes, absolutely. But she settled because at least he wouldn't leave her. And if that ain't a strong woman role model for you to watch, then I don't know what is. Growing up, I tried to do the opposite of what I saw her do, and for that, I'm not a silly girl with daddy issues. I'm a woman that knows how to conduct herself with self-worth above the level of a submissive, worn-out doormat. So I can't help but to get pissed off when I hear Joyce's voice, especially when it sounds like it's coming from the other room, calling my name, telling me to call my father, because I'm not going to. She either didn't know how bad of a dad he really was, or she willingly chose to ignore it because that was easier than causing any waves. Either way, I'm not fulfilling those wishes. and I've screamed at her to just go to heaven or go haunt my dad's place. Go sit in the dark corners of his home and call out, "Get sober, call your daughter." Because over here, Joyce's ghostly efforts are falling on deaf ears. My sons told me about the yellow-haired lady that plays with him in his room. Joyce was a blonde. Ethan's 3 years old, turning 4 in November. From the baby monitor we have in his room, my husband Joel has seen him have full-on conversations with something invisible. Running around his room, acting like he was getting tickled. It really creeped him out, and I didn't care for it too much either. One day, Ethan and I are on the topic of everyone starting out as a baby. He couldn't believe his mom used to be a baby like him, so I dug out a few photo albums that showed my age progression, at least till 13 or 14. The first picture that he sees with Joyce in it, Ethan starts pointing to it, saying, "That's her. That's the yellow-haired one." Of course it is. Since he was born almost regularly, Ethan's acted like he could see someone playing with him. Now that he's 3 and has a little vocabulary built up, he's been able to describe what he's seeing. Recently, I had a bit of a visual disturbance of my own. I'd just put him to bed for a nap. Joel was at work. It was the middle of the day. Walking out of Ethan's room, my back's facing the hallway, as I slowly close his door, trying not to wake him up again. I'm in our hallway, and when I turn around, I saw a tall man sidestep out of view into the bathroom, like he was trying not to get caught. I've seen shadow figures in the corner of my view before. Sometimes they could be floaties stuck in my eyes, but this man wasn't a silhouette, and I saw him straight on. He wore a white button-up with suspenders to hold his black pants, black shaggy hair, and an unkempt goatee. He was also partially see-through, tissue paper thin, and the direction he stepped would have been impossible if he had mass, because the bathroom door opens up right against the wall with a towel rack on it. Nobody could just move out of sight. That's how I knew he wasn't an intruder, but it still spooked me enough to scream and jump back into Ethan's room, waking him up. The person I saw standing there was definitely not Joyce. So now, who was that? Why are they here now? I told Joel about it when he got home that night, but what could he do about it? If anything, it just scared him more than he had already been. But human communication was invented to warn each other of danger. I've done no research to back that up, but I'm willing to bet ooga booga meant watch out. And when I finished, Joel had a few ooga boogas of his own that he'd experienced. For some reason, I think he didn't want to scare me because I'm the one primarily in the house while he's out. I told him to tell me about everything, though, because this is the stuff I'd really like to know. And if he's capable of hiding ghost encounters, he's capable of hiding loose women encounters. That was a lighthearted joke to break it up. I can vouch for that. I could understand his apprehension, though, because his story involved Ethan with a nail gun. Joel swears he would have never left a nail gun turned on just laying on the kitchen floor, but somehow he's folding laundry in the living room, and from behind him, he starts hearing something getting slammed around in the kitchen. He was already convinced the house was haunted because he had been hearing a woman's voice for a while as well, but he attributed it to Joyce and couldn't make out what was actually being said. Hearing the ruckus grow, the hair stood up on his neck. The kitchen was right directly behind him, over the lip of the couch, but he didn't want to look. And then he heard Ethan's voice say, "Thank you." That makes Joel turn around, and he sees him standing in the kitchen, looking into the discharged opening of the gun. He was holding on to the gun with both hands, grazing the trigger each time he shook it to hear the nails jingle inside the magazine. Joel leapt over the couch and pulled it out of Ethan's hands just as a nail shoots out. It went into the soft skin under Joel's jaw and stuck there. He pointed to a large red dot I noticed earlier, but I didn't stare at it because I thought it was a zit or something. I would have never guessed. He thought I was going to get mad and think that he was a bad dad, so he didn't tell me. And the nail wasn't a hospital wound, so it was easy to brush over. Joel removed the battery from the bottom and put the nail gun back into the drawer in the garage where it had been. That's where he said it never should have moved from. He said another time I was at home with Ethan and he was working late. He got a Ring doorbell notification, and when he pulled it up, he said that there were people outside our front door, but they weren't knocking. Their bodies were facing the door, but both of their heads were staring directly into the Ring camera, back at Joel through the feed. Both of their features were so sunken in, he wasn't able to see the color of their eyes beneath the shadows of their brows. His mic wasn't able to unmute fast enough for him to say anything before both of them quickly walked off the porch. He says they evaporated. But I know it's an older camera. That part may have been a pixelation problem. But he was positive that other things didn't morph into particles when they walked past the camera. He was in his car driving home right after seeing that, and I just thought that he was home early to surprise me, when in fact, before he'd come inside that night, he'd already combed the neighborhood and inspected every inch of our front, side, and backyards, looking for those people. Sometimes I wonder if all of this, the voices, the shadows, the strangers on the porch, has less to do with the house and more to do with me, with what I refuse to carry for my father. Joyce keeps trying to bridge something that I've already burned down, and every time I hear her voice in the other room, I know it isn't for Ethan. It isn't even for Joel. It's for me. A reminder and a demand. But what unsettles me more is the feeling that not all of these experiences are hers. The man in suspenders, the faceless pair at the door, they aren't family. They don't want reconciliation. They just watch. It's a steady, patient kind of watching, like they've been here far longer than I've realized, waiting for the moment that I'm weak enough to let them get closer or something. And if they've been invited by the cracks of my family left behind, then maybe that's the real curse. Once you open the door to the past, you don't get to choose who walks through. The longer this goes on, the more I notice little things changing. Cold spots in the hallway, the faint smell of Joyce's perfume drifting through the kitchen when I'm cooking dinner, Ethan waking up with new words that he swears someone whispered to him in the dark. Joel swears that he still hears someone walking at night when we're both in bed. But when he gets up to check the house, everything's quiet. And when I lie awake, I start to question if Joyce is really trying to help, or if she's only the mask, the familiar voice that I can stomach, the bait to keep me listening. Because once I'm listening, anything else can speak through. I used to scream at her to go haunt my dad and to leave me alone, but lately, I catch myself wishing that she would come back instead of the others. Her voice saying my name, it started to at least feel safer than the whispers I don't recognize. I guess at the end of the day, it's better to have a voice you recognize, because I really don't know how I'd feel if a voice I didn't recognize started calling my name, my son's name. Yeah, Joyce, she's all right. I never thought I'd run a bar, but then again, I'd never really thought about losing my grandfather either. Sure, you know it'll happen, but I never put much thought into it on purpose. He built this place with his own 2 hands back in the 70s, a narrow brick building with a dark wood beam, scuffed floors, and a line of bar stools that had seen more than one generation of regulars sinking into them. He always called it his second living room, though half the neighborhood practically lived there with him. When he passed, the bar came to me. I was grieving, overwhelmed, not sure at all that I could keep it alive. But walking through those doors felt like stepping back into his embrace. The air smelled of old wood and whiskey. The bar top was polished smooth where his hands had wiped it down thousands of times. Even the faintest trace of cigar smoke still clung to the rafters. That was his thing, cigars. He used to say, half joking but half serious too, "If you ever smell the smoke when I'm gone, that's me saying hello." I didn't believe it at first. I mean, everyone's got a story like that, right? But the first week that I worked there alone, closing up late, I smelled it. Sweet and smoky. Curling into the air, though no one had lit anything. I froze with a glass in my hand, staring at the darkened mirror behind the bar. For the first time since his funeral, I didn't feel quite so alone. It didn't take long to realize the bar held more than just his presence. The first big sign came on a slow Tuesday. I was wiping down the counter when a pint glass, empty and upside down, slid 2 feet across the bar on its own. I know how that sounds, but I swear to you, it didn't tip or roll, it glided. I tried to brush it off, but the next 2 weeks, I saw something in the bar's long wall mirror. Not my reflection, not anyone's reflection, but a man in a dark shirt, with his jaw clenched tight, sitting on the far end of the bar. Only there was nobody there when I turned around. I later learned from one of the old regulars that a man had died in a fight there decades earlier. They found him slumped at the very end of the bar, a broken bottle still clutched in his hand. I've caught glimpses of him in the mirror more than once since then, his eyes burning like he's still angry about whatever ended his life. I guess my grandfather kept that story from me for a reason. Then there was the laughter. That one unnerved me more than anything. On certain nights, especially when I was closing alone, I'd hear it float from the back booth. A woman's laugh, light and breathy. It wasn't cruel or menacing, just different. Like walking into a room and hearing a conversation you're not supposed to. Hushed tones. For this one, I think I know who. I was told about a woman who used to sing at the bar when my grandfather had first opened it. Everyone said that she would light up the whole place with her voice. She was killed in a car accident on her way home one night, and some of the older patrons swore that they'd still hear her singing from time to time. I've never heard the singing, but that's gotta be her laugh. I started leaving that booth untouched. No glasses stacked, no chairs upturned, just in case someone was sitting there. But my grandfather's presence is always different from the others. The other spirits feel like chaos. Snapshots caught in loops, replaying over and over without much awareness of me or anyone else. My grandfather, though, he's intentional. Sometimes when the bar was empty and still, I'd hear his boots on the floorboards, slow and steady, the exact rhythm of his stride. A few times I'd be locking up, and the old jukebox, half broken and unplugged more often than not, would crackle to life, play his favorite song. Always the same one, Earth Angel. The one he used to hum under his breath while stocking bottles, or doing much of anything, really. Then there was the cigar smoke. It came in waves, sometimes faint, sometimes so thick I'd cough. I'd smell it by the register, by my desk in the back, even once in the cellar where we kept the wine. Always when I needed comfort most. Always when the weight of running everything felt too heavy. Of course, people noticed things too. One night, a couple sat down at the bar, tourists from out of state. As I poured their drinks, the woman asked, "Is this place haunted?" I gave her the usual shrug. That's what they say. She told me that she'd seen a man in a fedora walk past the hallway, toward the restroom. Her boyfriend nodded and said that he saw him too. I didn't even flinch. That hallway's always been active. Lights flickering, shadows moving when no one's there. I guess it makes sense to me. The bar isn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who's ever passed through the doors, living or dead. But there was one night that cemented it all for me. I'd had a rough evening. Half the staff called out. A fight broke out near closing, and by the time everyone was gone, I was left cleaning the place alone. My nerves were shot, and I remember muttering to myself, I can't do this, Grandpa. This is too much. As I wiped down the last table, the air was heavy, like someone had turned on a bunch of TVs. There was like an electric buzz. And then I smelled it. Cigar smoke. Thick, unmistakable. My heart was sort of racing. The jukebox clicked on by itself. His song again. I had tears burning in my eyes. I knew then, as sure as I knew anything in my life, that he was still there. Not just an echo. Not just a loop. He was watching, encouraging me, making sure I knew I wasn't alone. Everything has sort of made me think of the bar as more than a business. It's a gathering place for the living, for sure, but also for those who can't seem to leave. Some of them are restless, some are sad, some are joyful, but they're all a part of the fabric of this place. I guess I used to sort of be uneasy about the idea of ghosts, but now I sort of take comfort in them, especially him. I'll be honest, though, I haven't seen him since that night. No smoke, no boots, no jukebox. Maybe he just wanted to introduce himself one last time, to let me know he trusted me to carry it all forward. And I've just decided that's enough, because every time I unlock those doors, I can almost hear him laughing behind the bar saying, "Welcome home, kid." And I just love that. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me, whether it's your first time or you're a regular. Your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes like this every Friday, and keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. And of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members: Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, COLTDADDY Eagle, MALLORY Dominguez, KARI WATKINS, PILAR TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, RIPLEY, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LAFRENIERE, Julie Bourdelais, Jennifer BECK, MARINA LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Landshark, Danielle Hecht, Veronica Mckiernan, Keziah Pietersen, Amber Baker, Khris Lauzon, Kara Gios, Marvin Allen, Forgotten Ruins TV, Raven Wolf, Carlos, Stacia Gillette, Nate Black, Jill Harper, Kathy Balkenbush, Cosmic Chick, Sierra Guerrero, Deanna Kuzma. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamara K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K., Brendan G., Paul T., Nicholas C., Tony P., Lizanne, Arlene F., Adrian, T.F. Parham, Jason G., Lori T., and Bobo Jenkins. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour, YT. Stay spooky. Hey friends, if you've made it this far and you're not asleep, why don't you check out the Darkest Hour merch at thedarkesthourYT.com. Pick up a hoodie, t-shirt, coffee mug, whatever your heart desires. Click the link in the description to check it out. Thanks.